Hi there, I am Jasmine the Empowerment Champion, and I'm immensely excited to be a part of the REC's 2022 conference. Thank you so much for inviting me to share on the area of well-being. So a little bit about me. As I said, my name is Jasmine and I am the Empowerment Champion. I'm a multiple award-winning TEDx International keynote speaker, trainer, and coach from the Like Me CIC. And the Like Me CIC is a personal leadership, employability, and well-being training organization. Hence the excitement of being a part of this conference and sharing on this topic. As you may know, my title is Managing Stress, Preventing Burnout. And that's because I'm acutely aware of what an important topic this is right now for the recruitment sector. So let's get started with looking at where we are with things. According to the HSE's 2021 report, 50% of all work-related ill health cases, I say 50% of them, are because of stress, depression, or anxiety. 50%. And a poll done by CV Library found that 81% of its 1,100 recruitment professionals said that their position creates high levels of stress, 81%. And I'm sure this comes as no surprise. The findings revealed that increase in workloads, tight deadlines, and irate clients were the major causes of that high level of stress. Now, according to JobVite, the stress levels of recruiters has increased by 61%. And for 19% of recruiters, that increase is drastic. So we can see stress is not, it's clearly not an employee problem. It is a company-wide issue. And I would go as far as to say it is a recruitment sector issue. The recruitment sector in that CV Library report came out as the second most stressful industry to work in, second only to the care sector. We need to do something. So that's why I said, if well-being isn't at the forefront and the top priority on the agenda, it ought to be. In 2019, poor mental health was thought to be costing UK employers about £45 billion a year. When Deloitte investigated this, their 2021 report, so their 2020-2021 report, has said that that has increased to up to 56 billion. That is the cost for UK employers. Now, let's look at this more specifically, because I've been talking about managing stress and burnout. When we look at the cost that burnout has to UK employers, it was revealed from 10 million employees that many of them took sick days related to feeling burnt out to such a degree that it's estimated that the cost is 700 million a year to the UK employer. And that's from MetLife UK. These statistics are shocking. Last one. 28% of employees have left or are planning to leave their employer in 2022, and they're citing poor mental health as the main reason in 61% of instances. We need to address this because the tide is moving in the wrong direction. We need to turn that tide. How can we? Well, you may have heard of the 3 C's for culture change. The 3 C's of culture change. We want to shift and get workplace well-being right at the forefront and running through every vein in the organization. How can we? Let's start with the first C, conscious organization. We need an organization that is conscious, that's intentional, and that's deliberate about well-being and mental health and managing stress. So we're going to need a well-defined mental health policy, a well-defined well-being strategy, we're going to need to make sure that we have a framework for reporting well-being. You and I both know if something goes unreported, it probably is overlooked. When we get those things reported and then they are presented, we are now more aware and inclined to investigate why. But if there are no statistics, probably not investigating nearly enough as to why this is what it is. We also need to have things like senior level champions and advocates for mental health and well-being who lead by example, who share the stories of others in the organization so that it can be seen that this really does matter. A quote by Maya Angelou says, people will forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. So my question to you is, how does your organization make its employees feel? As a leader in that organization, what you say and do will have an impact, but people will feel your energy. If that is stress and tension, that will speak more than the words that come out of your mouth. And the things that you do that might say, oh, you know, stress management is key and well-being is important, and we champion, you know, positive mental health. But if you're not an example of that, people will feel that, and that's what they're going to go with. As we know, communication, you know, roughly speaking, 93% of it is not down to the words. It's down to facial expressions. It's down to hand gestures. It's down to body language. We communicate far more by being who we are and by being the way that we are than what comes out of our mouth or what we type in an email or put on a poster. Conscious organization. The second C is competent management. Management are only going to do as much as they know to do. So if you have managers who know very little about mental health, they're not likely to manage it very well. We may have those that may know a lot more and maybe more understanding of it from personal experience, through research. You know, it will be maybe, depending on the individual. That is not sufficient. We need to ensure that management are adequately trained to spot the signs of poor mental health and stress. We need to ensure that management have been trained on how to have open conversations, on how to manage disclosure, sickness, absence. They need to be taught these things to ensure that they can do them. And then we also need to make sure that management are putting well-being check-ins on every relevant agenda to ensure that whether it's the one-to-one or the appraisal, team meetings, you know, we're just checking in at every given opportunity to find out how are the employees doing. And if we've got competent management, that's likely to filter down to confident staff. Everything's going to take time to trickle down from that conscious organization to competent management to confident staff, but it will come down. It starts at the top by and large to get the culture change and shift. So in order to help the staff become more confident, we need to have things like awareness raising days, well-being initiatives, and not these sporadic, you know, ad hoc things occurring once or twice a year, but regular initiatives, regular awareness days, and they're best done if they are staff-led. And we can also do things like stress testing. So this one, I'm going to share my screen with you to show how simple this can be. Stress testing could mean simply, you know, asking our staff between 0 and 10, where would you rate your stress level right now? 0 being 0, no stress whatsoever, 10 being severe, extremely high levels of stress that we know are going to be unsustainable. And this is something that could be quite easily done in a questionnaire. You know, we've got various different platforms that we can quite quickly and quite easily create questionnaires and then send them out to the staff, particularly if we include them as part of something regular, like a quarterly check-in with the staff, a quarterly staff, you know, not email, sorry, a quarterly staff review, mail out, just making sure we see where they're at. This could be done on how are you feeling today? This week, where would you say has been kind of like your main place over the last month, so that we can build a picture. And it's a great way to collect some stats that can then be reported. to stop that share now. We can also do things like make sure that we are promoting positive work-life balance. You know, asking staff, why are they coming in really early? Why are they staying really late? Leading by example of us not coming in super duper early and leaving really, really late, because if they see that, they're going to believe that's what's expected. And promoting peer-to-peer support. There will always be an element of, I feel more comfortable sharing among my peers if I know that there is supportive culture and a supportive environment. So these are some of the things that you are able to do in your organization to turn that tide so that you are now an organization that has positive and good workplace well-being. But I'm going to repeat that quote from Maya Angelou. People forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. So my question to you is, how do you feel? Because it's very hard to give what you haven't got. It's very hard to teach someone how to manage stress if you don't know how. It's very hard to lead in an area that you are deficient and weak. So I'm going to propose 3 R's so that you are able to personally improve your stress management to prevent your own burnout, and then let that lead by example. Let that enable you to come from a place of, I've been there and I know what it's like to feel stress because these were my stresses, and I know how we can move forward. This is what's worked for me. You may find it's different stuff for you, but it gives an added passion and people feel that. So my first R is that we need to recover. If we've been living in a state of heightened stress and that's become a norm, we are now less effective at recognizing what causes us to feel stressed because we just think this is normal. We're up here thinking it's normal when actually it should be down here. But the industry norm is saying it's a lot higher than that. So let's look at what is it that triggers us? What are our personal causes of stress? And we need to become more aware of this, because if we can understand it for ourselves, we're more likely to understand it for others. And then we can encourage others to share theirs. What builds trust in an organization, what supports that change is when people feel authenticity. They don't just hear it, they feel authenticity. And that comes from opening up and sharing your honest truth and your experiences. Second R is to reconnect. And this is going to mean that we need to resensitize ourselves to signs and symptoms of stress. Because if we're used to living here, what is down here that's indicating, oh, I'm getting really stressed, we're now numb to that, because it's got to be something massive that indicates I'm stressed. The palpitations, I feel like I'm getting chest pains, as opposed to just a little niggle that I feel in my head. We've numbed that out. We don't notice that anymore. We need to resensitize ourselves to stress, signs, and symptoms. And then when we become more aware of what the range of them are, and they can be mental, emotional, physical, behavioral, when we resensitize ourselves and raise our awareness of what they are and find out what they are for us, then we can now start to, third R, rise. And to rise up out of this intensely stressed state of being, we'll increase our resilience. To increase our resilience, we're going to need to do a few things. And one of them I suggest is just relabel stress. Because we think of stress as like, oh no, stress, Actually, all stress is not equal. Stress intrinsically is not a bad thing. It's the degrees that we need to think about. So I'm going to share my screen with you again. Stress is a scale. And so what I'm going to, so it's a curve. And so what we need to make sure that we are aware of is where we are on the stress curve. Because as you can see here, we can be over on the left-hand side, we're actually too little stress. So we're a bit bored, we're not as productive. Whereas the optimum level of stress, where we start to feel things like we feel motivated, we're focused, because we're in this optimum state, the little bit of pressure that we need helps us to peak perform. So it's getting us into that zone, into that space. That's what we need to do. So understanding that all stress is not bad, but actually I've got a bit of pressure out here, I've got a bit of stress, and it's like, yeah, let me rise to the challenge, as opposed to extreme levels of stress. We're moving into overload, where now we feel fatigued and exhausted. And if we're not careful, we move further beyond that, where performance begins to nosedive because we've got panic, anxiety, anger, burnout, breakdown. We're becoming sick, and in fact, it can lead to all manner of kinds of diseases. We need to be aware of this stress curve and make sure that we stay in the safe zone, and we're aware of what it is that indicates we're moving too far, and we need to look out for that in others. And I'll come back to this in a moment. So let me stop the share. And so relabeling stress, it's not all bad. And then simple things like just taking a breath, remembering to breathe. I know what I've had highly stressed points in my life, and if I were here to share my story, I'd tell you a whole lot more. But in those moments where I'm almost getting quite frantic, just stopping and taking a breath, just calms it all down, gets enough oxygen to my brain so that I'm able to think more clearly in that moment. Remembering to breathe, really key. And then things like promoting well-being, promoting stress management. And it goes back to having champions in the organization, maybe setting up, peer groups that are gonna not just work together, but steering groups that are gonna manage stress within the organization and represent all different levels. But their focus and their passion is about well-being. And then we want to make sure that we are, again, leading by example, as I've said before. This is key. Lead by example, be authentic. Don't expect people to do what you say as opposed to what you do. What you do means far more and has a far greater impact. And then focus. Focus on things like gratitude. And actually, in changing the cultural dynamic and shifting away from stress to well-being, changing that culture overall, encouraging your team to focus on gratitude. What are we grateful for? Let your team hear you sharing about your gratitude. Encourage your team to share things like this. That might seem soft and fluffy, but you know what? The benefits of them are immense, because let's remember those statistics that I shared at the beginning of this session. Gratitude has been found to have a profound impact on our well-being. Profound impact. And then also let's focus on learning about ourselves and about our colleagues, about our employees. I'm going to start the share once again to talk a little bit about this. Stress versus recovery. The autonomic nervous system, we have the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. And we need to become more aware of this within ourselves and learn about it for others. And this, we have it on our watches that can give a little bit of insight, but we've also got great bits of software that when we can wear a heart rate monitor, that enables us to match this with activities to find out what it is that means I'm in my sympathetic fight or flight system or my parasympathetic rest and recovery. Because not only is stress something that's mental, it is physiological. I may not feel stressed, but my body can still be in a state of stress. So if we're really serious and committed to changing the tide and addressing stress and preventing burnout, we've got to get to this kind of a level where we've enhanced our learning and understanding to such a degree that people are more aware about what is really stress for them on a physiological level versus what is really recovery for them. And that's something I'm happy to share more about. And that's all I wanted to share with you today. It starts with you. It starts with me. As leaders of our organizations, we've got to be that example. Here's our contact details, the Like Me CIC. Please feel free to get in touch with us should you have any questions, or if you'd like to find out more about how we can support you and empower you in your organization with well-being so that you can have your well-doing. thank you very much for joining me. I hope that's been of value. Do get in touch if you have any questions. Thanks a lot and goodbye.